Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio Story 6.
Imagine you are holding on to something you really value.
Okay.
You're gripping it so tightly, and you have so much anxiety about losing it that you completely fail to notice a magician standing right behind your back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this magician is systematically dismantling your entire life. You're like staring at a single penny in your hand while the vault door behind you is just left wide open.
Right. Yeah. It's essentially the ultimate act of psychological misdirection.
Exactly.
Because the most dangerous distractions, they never actually come from the magician. They come from your own obsession. You basically do the magician's job for them.
Because you're hyper-focusing on the wrong thing.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing all the heavy lifting for the illusion.
Well, we're unpacking this centuries-old text that dissects this phenomenon perfectly.
It really does.
It's an excerpt from a classic Chinese collection called Liao Zai Ji. The story we're looking at is titled Planting a Pear Tree.
And the goal is to use this really bizarre story of a street magic performance to explore this razor-sharp critique of human psychology. We're looking at the pure absurdity of greed.
And why human beings are, seemingly hardwired to protect pennies while losing dollars.
Yeah, to really understand the puzzle here, we have to look at the author's central argument.
Okay.
The writer, he refers to himself as the strange historian, and he is just fascinated by cognitive dissonance.
Which is such a modern concept, really.
Right. He uses this narrative as a case study to prove his thesis, which is that people will guard their minor possessions with this irrational ferocity, only to lose absolutely everything through sudden distraction or vice or just disaster.
So the text forces you to look at how a misplaced sense of ownership can actually make you entirely vulnerable.
Exactly. It makes you a target.
So let's test that thesis by looking at the case study itself. Picture this bustling, chaotic market centuries ago. The sensory details in the source material are just incredibly vivid.
Oh, very much so.
Right in the middle of this packed crowd is a countryman with a massive cart. And this isn't, your average produce stand.
No, not at all.
The text makes a really specific point to describe his inventory. The cart is just overflowing with premium luxury goods.
Right. These are pears, but they're described as exceptionally sweet, intensely fragrant, and priced sky high.
Premium stuff.
Yeah, the seller knows exactly what he has. He's expecting to make an absolute killing. This is top-tier inventory that he's meticulously cultivated and transported.
Right.
And he's standing there anticipating a highly profitable day. His entire mindset is locked into protecting the monetary value of that cart.
But then the variable is introduced. Out of the crowd steps a Taoist priest.
Right.
Visually, he is the absolute antithesis of the luxury goods sitting in that cart.
Yeah, he's dressed in ragged, torn clothes.
He's wearing this torn head wrap. And he walks right up to this mountain of premium pears, and he just begs the seller for one single pear.
Just one out of hundreds.
Right.
And the seller's reaction is where this whole psychological examination really begins. Because he doesn't just politely decline.
No, he definitely...
He aggressively, explosively refuses. He shouts at the priest. He curses at him.
It's intense.
Yeah, the reaction is so loud and so venomous that it actually stops the bustling market in its tracks. Everyone just turns to look.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there and actually push back on the premise for a second.
Sure.
Let me play devil's advocate. We are judging the seller, but, it is his property.
True.
He grew those pears. He probably spent weeks tending to them and then hauled that heavy cart all the way to the market. Why should he be obligated to give his premium inventory to some random beggar?
Right.
Isn't the Taoist actually the antagonist here, demanding something for nothing?
Well, your reaction is completely natural, and it's actually the exact trap the author wants you to fall into.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It is absolutely his property, but the text isn't critiquing his legal right to refuse. It's analyzing the disproportionate emotional violence of his refusal.
Ah, I see.
Let's look at it through the lens of loss aversion. The Taoist points out the math to the seller and to the whole crowd. He basically says, look, you have a cart with hundreds of pears. I am asking for exactly one.
Right, the math doesn't lie.
Exactly. Losing one single pear is not going to harm your profits or your livelihood in any meaningful way. So the critique is aimed at the seller's inability to contextualize the loss.
He's losing his mind over nothing.
Right? He isn't protecting his business. He's reacting as if his very survival is under attack over a fraction of a percent of his inventory.
That makes perfect sense. He's like treating a paper cut like a mortal wound.
Exactly.
It's like watching someone with a massive, overloaded grocery cart of premium food refusing to spare a single bruised apple for someone who's hungry.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
And even as a crowd of onlookers begs them to just be cool about it, they're just screaming.
It's a modern phenomenon, too, honestly. Oh, absolutely.
You see people on the internet engage in these digital shouting matches, destroying their own peace of mind for hours, just to aggressively defend some entirely trivial point against a total stranger.
Yes. The emotional investment completely outweighs the actual value of the thing being defended.
Right.
And the crowd in the market, they see this disproportionate response immediately. The onlookers gather around and they actually try to mediate.
Because they're annoyed.
Yeah, they see the math. They tell the seller, hey, just give the ragged priest a bad pear. They literally suggest finding a bruised, subpar piece of fruit just to make the man go away and restore the peace.
But the seller is so stubborn, he refuses to part with a single atom of his property.
He really does.
So the situation only resolves when a third party steps in. A hired shop worker from a nearby stall comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And he is completely fed up with the screaming.
Yeah, the Child uses a great phrase for it, describing it as unbearable chatter and nagging.
Right. The worker's just trying to do his job, and this petty argument is giving him a massive headache.
So what does he do?
He reaches into his own pocket, buys a pear from the stubbornly angry seller at full price, and just hands it to the Taoist priest.
The worker essentially pays the stupid tax just to buy some quiet.
Yeah, exactly.
But this transaction, this is the pivot point of the narrative. This is the exact moment the text shifts from a mundane observation of petty greed into this wild exploration of extreme psychological distraction.
Because the Taoist accepts the pear, he thanks the shop worker, and then he turns to the crowd.
Right.
He projects his voice and announces that those who have left the secular world, monks like him, are not stingy.
Which is a direct dig at the seller.
Totally. He claims he actually has his own beautiful, delicious pears, and he invites the entire market to share them with him.
Which naturally prompts the most logical question possible from the audience.
Right. Someone actually yells out from the crowd. They're like, if you have your own fine pears, why didn't you just eat those instead of begging and causing this massive scene?
Right. Why go through all this trouble? And the Taoist's answer is what sets the trap.
What does he say?
He holds up the pear the worker just bought him and says, I just needed the seed to plant them.
I just needed the seed. Okay, let's break down the physical mechanics of what happens next, because the source material is incredibly specific here.
It really is.
The priest eats the pear. He keeps the seed in his hand. He takes this iron digging spade right off his shoulder.
Yeah.
And right there in the hard-packed, trampled dirt of the marketplace, he just digs a shallow hole. He drops the seed in and covers it with dirt.
And this is where the author, Pusongling, introduces a really crucial disruption of logic.
Oh, this part is wild.
The Taoist asks the crowd for hot water to water his newly planted seed, and some busybody in the crowd actually runs over to a roadside shop and brings back boiling water.
Boiling water. Not warm water. Boiling water.
Exactly. Boiling water.
Why boiling water? I mean, that seems like such a weird, totally counterproductive detail to include.
It is, but it's entirely deliberate. Think about the nature of boiling water in agriculture.
Right. It kills things.
Exactly. Boiling water destroys life. It sterilizes seeds. It stops growth permanently.
Yeah.
So by having the Taoist pour the destroyer of life over the soil to somehow create life, the author is signaling a total suspension of reality.
Oh, I get it.
The boiling water is a literary device. It's telling the reader and the crowd that the normal rules of physics and commerce and logic just no longer apply. The spectacle has officially begun.
It is the ultimate misdirection. The text describes 10,000 eyes gathering and staring.
Oh.
Every single person is just captivated. And out of that sterilized dirt, a tiny green sprout emerges.
The text actually provides this mesmerizing time-lapse description.
Yeah, tell me about that.
The sprout grows rapidly into a trunk, branches shoot out, lush leaves uncurl, it instantly flowers, the flowers drop, and suddenly a fully grown tree is heavy with huge, sweet-smelling pears.
Which is insane.
Right. And they are pears that look exactly like the premium luxury goods the countryman was selling.
Okay, let's use a modern analogy to explain how this level of spectacle affects the human brain. Because, I mean, we still fall for this today.
Oh, all the time.
Think about how a casino operates. A casino is entirely designed to overwhelm your senses, so you fail to process basic math.
Yes. Exactly.
There are flashing lights, ringing bells, plush carpets, free drinks. The spectacle completely overloads your cognitive processing.
Right, you get lost in it.
You watch the spinning wheels and completely ignore the statistical certainty that your pockets are just quietly being emptied.
Mm-hmm.
The sensory overload is literally the mechanism of the theft.
And that is precisely what is happening in the market. The crowd, and specifically the Pear seller, are completely hypnotized by the blinking lights of this magic trick.
They're stunned.
They are watching an impossibility unfold, and their critical thinking just completely shuts down.
And the Taoist capitalizes on this immediately. He steps up to this miraculous tree and starts plucking the fruit. He hands it out generously to the crowd. He just keeps handing out pears until every single one is gone and the tree is completely stripped bare.
But, the performance requires an exit strategy.
Naturally.
So with the fruit gone, the priest takes his iron spade. And the text includes this great auditory detail.
Oh, the ding-ding sound.
Yes. Ding-ding as he hacks at the trunk of the tree. He chops at it until the trunk snaps. He throws the leafy wood over his shoulder, turns around, and just calmly strolls out of the market.
And this is where my jaw literally dropped reading the source material.
It's the best part.
The text executes this brutal perspective shift. We pan the camera away from the departing magician and focus right back on our countryman, the fiercely protective pear seller.
The man who just moments ago was willing to physically fight a beggar over a single piece of fruit.
Yeah, that guy. He'd been standing in the crowd this entire time. His neck was craned. He was absolutely mesmerized by the illusion.
Right. His intense focus on his property was completely overridden by the spectacle.
So it's only after the Taoist has vanished and the crowd is just happily chewing on their free fruit that the seller snaps out of his trance.
He wakes up.
He turns his head back to his cart. And what he finds is total devastation. The cart is completely 100% empty.
Wow.
Every single premium pear is gone.
So the mechanism of the trick finally becomes clear.
Yeah.
The Taoist didn't conjure fruit out of thin air. He used the spectacle of the growing tree to mask the fact that he was just magically teleporting the seller's actual inventory onto those illusionary branches.
So the pears the crowd just ate were the seller's pears.
Exactly. They ate his entire livelihood.
But the heist goes even deeper, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The seller is staring at his empty cart in just absolute horror, and then he notices the structural damage.
Right.
One of the thick wooden handles, like the shafts used to pull the heavy cart, has been freshly and violently chopped off.
And that's when the puzzle pieces click together.
The tree, the trunk that the Taoist was hacking away at with his spade.
The ding-ding sound.
Yes. The trunk he threw over his shoulder and carried away, that wasn't a magical tree. It was the handle of the man's cart.
The illusion was absolute. The Taoist dismantled the man's entire livelihood right in front of his face.
It's almost terrifying.
The seller literally stood there and watched his own cart handle be chopped off, completely blind to reality because his brain was processing it as a magical tree.
Because of that cognitive blind spot.
Exactly. His hyper-focus on the spectacle created a massive cognitive blind spot.
So the seller completely panics. He realizes he has been robbed blind while he stood there cheering.
Yeah.
He frantically chases after the priest. He runs down the street, turns a corner, and finds his chopped-off cart handle just tossed carelessly by a wall.
But the Taoist...
The Taoist is gone.
And when the devastated seller trudges back to the market holding his broken handle, realizing his entire fortune is just gone, the text delivers this final, brutal blow.
What happens?
The entire market bursts into laughter at him.
Oh, that's rough.
The very people who just ate his stolen inventory laugh at his foolishness.
It is a brutal humiliation. But, what elevates this text from a simple folktale to a philosophical treatise is what happens next.
The commentary.
Right, the narrative stops, and the author steps in to deliver a direct diagnosis of the human condition.
And the strange historian offers a completely unsympathetic verdict here.
He does not hold back.
He states that the countryman's behavior was absurd and he absolutely deserved to be mocked by the market. But he doesn't just stop there.
Right.
He zooms out to analyze the broader psychology of greed, comparing this petty seller to wealthy misers in society.
He paints a very specific psychological profile of these misers. These are people who possess incredible wealth but operate from a mindset of absolute scarcity.
Yes.
The historian says, imagine a miser whose good friend falls on hard times and asks for a tiny amount of rice. Instead of feeling empathy, the miser feels intense anger.
Because they immediately start calculating the loss. They think, oh, that rice equates to several days' worth of my own supplies. And if they're asked to help someone in distress or feed a lonely orphan, their fury only increases.
It's like a sickness.
They rationalize their selfishness by calculating that could feed 5 or 10 people. I cannot bear that cost.
Wow.
The author points out that these individuals will literally fracture their own families, fighting with fathers, sons, and brothers over tiny ancient weights of silver called zizu.
So they will burn down their real-world relationships to protect fractions of a penny.
Yes.
But here is the massive contradiction the author nails, the real core of the cognitive dissonance.
Right, the vulnerability.
Exactly. These exact same hyperprotective people, the ones who scream at beggars and alienate their families over a bowl of rice, they have a massive vulnerability.
When their minds are clouded by a different obsession, all of that rigid calculation just vanishes.
Poof. Gone. The author points out that when these misers get addicted to gambling, or when they are blinded by lust, they will empty their entire life savings without a single second thought.
It's wild.
They will just pour out their purses for a vice.
Mm.
Or, in a more extreme example from the text, when faced with extortion, like when there is a literal knife and saw at their neck,
They suddenly find the money.
they will pay absolutely any ransom to save their own lives. All those intense calculations about 5 days of food just simply evaporate.
Right. So if we synthesize what the strange historian is arguing here, he's basically positing that the Pear seller is just a micro-example of this massive societal flaw.
Okay.
Human beings have an incredible capacity for selective valuation. We guard our minor possessions, our pears, with this irrational, aggressive ferocity.
You do.
We pick fights, we hold grudges, we sever family ties to protect a tiny fraction of our wealth or our ego.
We think we're being strategic. We think we're fiercely protecting our kingdom, when in reality we're just obsessing over a single bruised apple.
And by locking our focus onto the trivial, we render ourselves completely blind to the catastrophic. We become so consumed by the petty argument or the minor financial loss that we leave ourselves entirely open to ruin. We lose everything to distraction, to vice, or to sudden disaster because we were too busy guarding a seed.